let's talk about what you need to actually clean your dishes. So, sponge, dish brush, what do you use? This is kind of a personal preference, but before we get into that, let's talk about a sponge. So you may have heard, and you may know, sponges are very absorbent. They have all these tiny holes. They're great at holding things. Well, in addition to water and liquids, they also hold bacteria. And so if you're gonna use a sponge, you need to make sure to sanitize it every so often, and you also need to probably throw it away every week or a couple of weeks, because it can store that bacteria and it can degrade and be more likely to hold the bacteria. So not my personal preference, but if you're gonna do it, make sure you sanitize it. So to sanitize it, you can throw your sponges in a quart of water with about 3 tablespoons of bleach, and you can scale that up obviously if you need to. Let it sit for 5 minutes and then just rinse it out, and that'll kill all the bacteria. 2 other ways you can do it is you can soak it in water and then throw it in the microwave. I think 30 seconds or a minute, I'm not sure off the top of my head. You can search that one online. Or you can put it in your dishwasher with hot water and a hot dry cycle. And that will kill it as well. The bleach is the most effective, but the other ways work as well. If you're gonna use a sponge, you need to make sure to do that. Let's talk about scrub brushes. So if you're gonna get a scrub brush, which is my personal preference, I recommend getting one with the plastic scraper on it, whether it be on the back or somewhere else on the brush. This has come in handy so many times when trying to get some tough things off of pans and pots. This hard plastic is a little better, because you know what, if you don't have this hard plastic, you end up using your fingernails, and or a fork or something like that. And that's not as good as plastic, because plastic's not gonna be as hard on yourself or on what you're cleaning. The next thing is how long or short do you want the handle to be. In my opinion, I like the longer handle. Keeps your hands further away from all the soap and all the water. And the more water you get your hands on, they actually dry out more, and then you get it all soapy, then you gotta rinse it off. But the small one is maybe a little more maneuverable. So it's kind of a personal choice. You know, try something out, see what you like. In our house, what we like to use is the long brush like this, and then we also have what's called a bottle brush. And that's basically like this, but it's a cylinder, and so you can clean a bottle or a cup or a bowl or anything with steep walls. You can clean it really well. So, but what do you need to use with those scrub brushes or sponges? Well, you're gonna need some dish soap, and I recommend you get a dish soap dispenser. They're only a couple dollars. You can get ones that are pretty, you can get ones that are cheap in plastic. Doesn't really matter. It's a lot easier to press on a handle like this, or a lever or whatever you wanna call it, than it is to have to grab the bottle and turn it upside down every time you need it, especially when your hands are all soapy and you're in the middle of it. Get a dispenser. Keep some hand soap next to your sink too, because you're gonna wanna wash your hands in the kitchen, obviously. And some people will keep lotion in there next to their sinks as well. Just make sure it's obvious. I can't say how many times I've been at someone's house and I went to go wash my hands and then I squirt lotion in my hands. Like, come on, that's very annoying. So one other thing that my parents have in their kitchen is they've got this little mat that they actually put underneath their soap dispenser. And it's nice because it catches any drippings that come down, and you can have the sponge or the scrub brush sit on top of it. It soaks up the water instead of just soaking on your counter, because regardless of your counter material, you probably don't want water or any kind of liquid just sitting on your counter. It's not necessarily good for it. All right, so let's talk about the sink a little bit. So you can see here, they have the kind of sink with a head that is, one, it's got this high arch on it, and two, it's a removable head. If you ever lived without one of these and you've lived with one, you know that this can make a very big difference in how easy and how miserable it can be to clean. In our first apartment we lived in together, my wife and I had a shallow sink and no head like this. It just came out of the sink, of the counter, just like this. And so you had this much space, and it's a pain in general, but especially when you're trying to clean a big pan or a big pot, having this big arch helps, and then having the removable head like this helps a lot. So also with the spray option like that, whenever I'm cleaning, I turn the water on high heat, and then I put on that sprayer, and that takes care of most of the hard work for me. So if you don't have this, I'd recommend you get it. If you obviously own your own house, put it in. It's really not that expensive or too hard. Or if you're uncomfortable with that, you can get a plumber, but just get on YouTube. You can find it out if it's something that you think you could tackle on your own. And if you are living, if you're just renting, ask your landlord. Maybe something they're interested in doing or willing to do, you may be able to work out a deal where you can split it, or it's technically an improvement to their apartment or house. So just ask. It never hurts to ask. All right, another thing in the sink is a drying rack. Now, depending on how many dishes you have, how many people you're living with, you may be okay with just one drying rack in your sink. Or depending on if you have the single sink, whoa, almost fell over there. If you have a single sink or a double sink, you may want to have your drying rack in the sink, or you may want to have it on the counter. Now, there's also something called a dish mat, M-A-T, and basically that's just a giant absorbent towel, basically, usually with some kind of foam in it so you can place things on top of it. When we lived with 5 roommates, we actually had both. We had a rack in the sink, and then we had some mats out to the side because we had a lot of dishes. So if you're gonna have a rack out on the counter, just make sure it either has a tray underneath it to have the water go down into the sink, or you put a mat underneath it to soak up that water. Because again, you don't want soaking liquids on top of your counters. You're gonna need a paper towel roll and some kind of holder on it. We had a kind that was under the sink that we like, or under the cabinet that we liked a lot. It's called a one hand, so you could grab it and tear it with one hand, which we'd recommend. And then one other thing, if you have a dishwasher, which hopefully you do because they make the world so much easier, you're gonna need some dishwasher detergent and some rinse aid to prevent spots. And then you may want to have a little magnet on it that helps people know if it's clean or if it's dirty. Especially if you live with other people, you don't want people trying to load dirty dishes into a clean dishwasher or vice versa.